Hi, and welcome to another episode of Ask on CYC. So we all know the famous Bible verse, "When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. And when I was in prison, you visited me." But is that where service is limited to? And is it true that marriage and having children is taking people away from service? We're about to find out in today's episode on service. So if you have a question, please don't forget the phone number is 0416 551 292. And if you're daring enough to call in and ask your question live, we'll answer it for you. And don't worry, we're not going to ask you who you are. You will remain anonymous. So I want to introduce you to today's guest, Father Daniel Fanous. Welcome, Father.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure having you on the show tonight.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Father, service, you're a priest. Service is your middle name. So let's look at it, and let's start with something spiritual from the Bible. So why did Jesus wash the disciples' feet?
Sure. So I think by Christ washing their feet, he's trying to show the church something very, very important. And that's for those that are going to be the most important service, those who are going to have, if you like, the greatest positions in the church, which is what the apostles were. If they think that that kind of position in the church is based on anything else besides the humility of washing somebody's feet, of literally putting yourselves at their feet, serving them even when it's uncomfortable to wash somebody's feet, to wash someone's feet that might be dirty, someone's feet that might be filled with filth, then that's what service is. And so any service that's not understood at the feet of another person is not service. It's not true service. Any service that's comfortable, any service that suits me, is convenient, makes me feel good, is not what service is about. And so especially for those people that are entrusted with that kind of ministry, being the apostles who would become the future bishops of the church, that has to be the focus of their service, to wash somebody else's feet. Any service understood outside of that is always problematic.
But is service limited to just visiting the sick or giving food to the poor?
No, I don't think so at all. I think service is much broader than that. At the end of the day, we use the word service to mean something very simple, literally to serve God. And so if I'm serving God, whether that's Him directly, whether that's through His people, it doesn't matter. I serve in whatever capacity I have. If I have a talent that is able to, I have possessions to give to those who are the poor, then do that. If I have the ability to serve with my mind, then I do that. If I have the ability to serve with my emotions, then I do that. If I can understand people, if I can bring kindness to people, I do that. So I certainly don't think we should limit service to, for example, Sunday school or just visitations of the sick or those in nursing homes or in the hospital. Service is much broader than that. Service is literally serving God in whatever capacity I have.
So if we look at the Bible verse, "When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty in prison," should we take that literally? And if yes, do we need to obey this verse in order to enter heaven?
Sure, I think you need to look at what the basis of what Christ is doing there. And so He's picking out certain situations, somebody that's poor, somebody that's sick, somebody that's in prison, somebody that's hungry. And He's picking out those different situations and saying that I am that person. I am that person that makes you uncomfortable. I am that person that is thirsty. I am that person that is hungry. I am that person that is poor, the beggar on the street. I am the person that's lonely, that's committed a crime, that's sitting in a prison cell with no one caring about me. And so He's saying to us, I'm that person that makes you uncomfortable. I'm that person that is rejected by society. Because obviously, if you know, at the time before, at Jesus' time, if somebody was sick, generally it means they're infectious. And so, for example, if somebody's a leper, if someone's got pneumonia, if someone's got some kind of illness like that, they're literally rejected out of society. So much so that they would eventually develop cities for sick people, and they would live outside the city. So what Christ is really saying is, I'm that rejected person. I'm that person that's sick, that's been rejected by society. I'm that person that's committed a crime and has been rejected by society. Will you come and serve me? Will you serve the person that makes you uncomfortable? Will you serve that person that has no one to serve them, that absolutely rejected person? So I think that's what Christ is doing in that situation. So for us, does that mean that I have to go and pick out the most rejected person to serve? Well, yes and no, because it's beautiful if I do, but I serve with my capacity. So for example, if I see somebody on the train that has a need, then I do something good for them. I do something kind to them. That can be just as effective if that's to my capacity. And if I do that to those people that are weak and rejected that I see in around me on the train, on the bus, at uni, at work, then that gives me the capacity so that if I do see somebody that is truly that rejected person that Christ is talking about, then I have the capacity to serve them. Because it's been my pattern, it's been my life, it's been my way for so many days, so many years. And so it's almost natural to go to that rejected person.
I remember when they interviewed Mother Teresa and asked her, you know, you're dealing with people who have wounds, who have infections and, you know, blood and pus and all this. How can you deal by cleaning and serving these people? And she answered and said, I clean the wounds of Christ, you know. So she sees Christ through this service.
Yeah, yeah.
And is that our objective, to see Christ?
100%, 100%. If there's any objective besides serving Christ and seeing Christ in people, there's no purpose. I remember there's a famous Russian nun by the name of Mother Maria Skobetsova, and she served in France, in Paris, during the time of communism when a lot of the refugees were coming from Russia to France under communism. And so people would often find her to be scandalous because she would go and serve the prostitutes. She would serve the really, really sick people. And they said to her, why are you associating yourself with such people, such filth, such scum of the earth? You know what she said to them? She said, the second you recognize that the image of God is in that person just as much as it is in me, only that in their case the image is covered by dirt and filth and rubbish, then you'll spend every second you have washing that filth away, cleansing that filth, so that the image of God can come through. So yeah, 100%. You have to see the image of God in that person. You have to see Christ in that person. That's part of service. And that means I see him as much in that weak, rejected person as I see it in the person that's, you know, very friendly and lovely to hang out with and very convenient to serve. So that's why we say you can't just pick out and say, I'll serve that person or not that person.
So going back to the Bible verse, when I was in prison, you visited me. Speaking on behalf of here in Australia and maybe worldwide, it is the most neglected service in our community. Why is that?
It's a difficult question to kind of answer. I think a big part of it is that prisons are isolated, and so they're often in areas that are away from the main centres. Secondly, there's a stigma that goes with prisons, so that I know that the person that I'm serving in that prison cell is somebody that's committed often a crime, and that crime might be quite heinous, might be quite terrible, and so there's almost a fear that they're a criminal, that they could hurt me, that it's dangerous. Also, in some cases, the people that are in prisons were socially ostracised even before they committed the crime. So because of their lifestyle, because of their path, they might have been distant from the church in the beginning. And so they were kind of lost to contact. They were lost to follow-up even before they started getting into prison. And so I think there's two main issues there. One is the stigma, and the other one is and the fact that it's a difficult service. And the second one is that often that they're unknown. Often they're unknown. Often their families are embarrassed to tell the priest that, look, my son or my daughter is in prison. Often they themselves don't have many friends that are in the church. And so we don't actually know about them. And so I think that's where a lot of the difficulty comes from.
But if someone had the desire to get into this service, do they need to know anyone to do a visitation?
Oh, look, it's obviously, it depends again on the prison, on the situation. It's obviously safe that they're doing that not just individually, that they're doing that through the church or through a priest that might already be interested in that service. For example, in Sydney, we have a number of priests that are very interested in that service. So anyone that is interested can obviously speak to them, and they can direct them how to serve in prison, where to serve in prison, what are the things to watch out for, what are the things to be aware of, what are the ways to speak to certain prisoners. Because obviously it's not a simple kind of service, it's more of a more difficult kind of service, but certainly a very valid and very necessary service.
Okay, so moving on, sometimes people, you know, they have the drive and the spirit and they get involved in 10 to 15 different types of services. And they stay motivated and they stay driven for a while, but eventually they're going to fall in love. And when they fall in love...
Unfortunately, it happens.
They become consumed with more responsibilities like family and possibly children later on down the track. Then bang, all of a sudden, they struggle to even serve in one service. So how does one still maintain the spirit and the drive to continue service?
Sure. So I think probably the most important thing is you have to look at what's the purpose of their service in the beginning. If their purpose of their service was something to do on a Sunday, was to be in a social group, to be have a bit of status, to meet a girl or to meet a guy, then obviously as they go into that relationship, the service will kind of fall away naturally. And that's not so much because the service is kind of exclusive with the relationship. It's just that the interest was different, wasn't right. The interest wasn't right. But I believe that for those that the interest is right, of course you'll find that their service slows down a little bit, especially in that stage where they get married and they have children. But at the same token, you'll often find for people that are very interested in service, that their service changes. And so they may not serve in the same kind of way or the same kind of style, but they'll pick it up in a different area. So for example, some who were before, doing visitations in Sunday school every single evening will find that they no longer have the time, they've got responsibilities, they've got children. And so they might pick that up by going into a more organisational kind of role. So I think it's not so much about looking at marriage as being at odds with service. It's more about looking about how can my marriage complement my service? In what ways can I serve whilst being married? And certainly we have many, many examples of people that have been able to marry the two, not to use the pun.
But is it okay to stop service after marriage?
Again, it depends what you mean by service and why you're stopping the service. So if you mean by service, stop Sunday school service because I'm married and because I haven't got the time for it and I want to serve in another different way, sure, that's fine. But if you're saying stop service as in I no longer do anything else besides attend church on a Sunday, then obviously no. Because that means that you think that Sunday or service can be kind of restricted to 2 hours on a Sunday. Sure. Whereas for us, what we believe is that service is literally serving God. And that means in every moment I have, in every day, in my work, in my uni, in my studies, in my life, in my family, with my friends, that should be my focus. How can I serve God in this situation? Which means that it's a more ubiquitous kind of service. It's it permeates every stage of my life, every part of my life.
Okay. Look, this is based on my opinion,
sure.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Since the 90s and early 2000s, I've been seeing a downfall generally speaking, in servants. Is this the case? What do you think?
Look, I'm not sure. I certainly not aware of any kind of statistics that show that out. In my own experience, I don't necessarily see that to be the case.
The question kind of is the passion less now?
The passion? Again, I don't think so. I see now, compared to when I was a youth, when I was quite young, in Sunday school I was often served by, which is nothing wrong with that, but that was my only Sunday school servant. Nowadays we're seeing youth serving en masse. Sunday school classes where there's sometimes 2 or 3 young guys, 2 or 3 young girls. So I think actually it's the opposite. I think people are starting to realise that service is for everybody. Service isn't for the Sunday school servant, the tunt, the uncle. Service is for everybody, and so that can be for a 20-year-old, it can be for a 30-year-old, it can be for a 50-year-old, it can be for a 60-year-old. Everyone has the capacity to serve, and everyone should have the capacity to serve and should serve.
Okay. So with service, my next question is it wrong to serve too much?
Yes, you often hear about that where people will say, I found that I served so much and I did this and I went to all the meetings and I was running this and I was running that, and then I found that I lost my personal relationship with Christ. I find that's a pretty simplistic answer or simplistic way of putting that. I think when I say I'm serving too much, again, it's because I've lost my focus. If my focus is to serve God, and that is my only focus, not my own kind of comfort, not my own kind of gratification, not my own kind of status, not so that I can be, have a prestige in the church and be respected as the Amin al-Khidma or a priest or a deacon or a Sunday school servant or a librarian or whatever it is. If my purpose is purely Christ, then I don't think there's such thing as serving too much. Because what it means is that my whole life is dedicated to Him. Everything I do is for Him. If I'm on the train and somebody needs a seat, I offer it to them. That's service. If a pregnant lady is walking and something's on and she drops her bags, I help her. If I walk past and I see a stick or a branch on a car and it's blocking a windscreen, I move it. You know what I mean? And so my whole life is dedicated to making other people's lives better. My whole life is dedicated to showing the light of Christ to the people that need comfort. And so I don't think you can do that too much. I think sometimes that if I find that it's distracting me, it's probably distracting me because there's something wrong in the way I'm serving, in my intention in serving. The other case sometimes where we say people are serving too much is when they're literally doing that at the cost of their responsibilities. So Christ never expects us to serve at the cost of our responsibilities. He doesn't expect, for example, that I don't see my wife because I'm, serving 7 days a week and I use an excuse that I'm a priest. Because then I'm neglecting my responsibilities. I'm not being a husband. And being a husband is part of my service. Because as I said, service isn't limited to Sunday school. Service is about making lives better, bringing the light of Christ to people. And I should do that as a husband, I should do that as a father, I should do that as a brother, I should do that as a son. And that's just as important as the rest of my service. And so I need to balance those elements.
Sure. Just a little, experience that I've had up until today, the past few weeks. Services have been growing. So there is literally, in my life right now, there's literally a service every single evening of the week. So
that's a good thing.
It is a good thing, and just being in the service is great, and But I made a decision because I felt it becoming too much. So I made a decision that I'm going to pull back out of a couple and slow down in a third. Because I don't want to hate the service. If I feel the pressure and if I feel it just piling up and all these commitments just getting to me, I was worried that eventually I will start to hate service. So I made the decision just to pull back.
Sure.
But it caused a dilemma with me. Because when I pulled back, I felt something missing. I felt a void in my life because I loved it when I was there serving. But now, when I made the decision to pull back, I
kind of
felt
feel there's a gap
void.
there.
There's something's missing in my life.
Sure.
How do I deal with something
Well,
like
I mean, there's nothing necessarily wrong with what you've done. So if you feel that you've overcommitted and that you don't have time for your own personal retreat, your own personal solitude or your own personal silence with God, then sure, you should stop it. Because as I said, you've got responsibilities. That responsibility may be to your partner, to your children, whoever, but it also is a responsibility to yourself, that you build your own life, There's no point, what profits a man if he saves the whole world but loses himself? And so we have to be a little bit careful there. But by the same token, sometimes we feel overwhelmed in the service and we use words like burnout and these kind of things. But again, it's because something's wrong in the way I'm serving. I'm carrying the burden myself. I'm not offering that burden to God. I'm trying to do everything by myself. Maybe I'm not delegating. Maybe I'm not working well with the team. But generally, it's because I'm trying to do everything by myself, and I think I'm the savior. I think I can save every Sunday school kid. I think I can, build every wall. I think I can, convert every single person I meet in the street. And so sometimes there's a God complex going on there as well.
Sure.
So I think it's all about balance and making sure that your motivations and your intentions are pure, that my purpose in serving God is to serve God, not to do anything else.
Sure. So it's okay to take on just one service and just put your whole heart into it rather than 5, 6 different services?
Everyone's different. Some people are very good at multitasking. They're good at holding 5 different services. Some people are good at one service. Some people don't even have an official service. But because their life is directed towards God, every moment of their life is service. Is they're bringing the light of God, they're bringing the comfort of God, they're washing people's feet in every moment of their lives.
Sure.
And that's just as valuable, if not more valuable, than running a Sunday school class, doing a CYC show, wearing a black hat.
Sure. Okay. Just a reminder to the audience, if you have a question or you want to call up and ask a question, please, the number is 0416 551 292. Also, if you're not involved in a service and you want to ask Father of a service, please text in or call up and ask him. He'll guide you and he'll tell you of a service. There are many services out there. Like I said, every night of the week there's a service here in Sydney. So if you want to know of a service, please ask us and we'll help you find a service. So we're going to go for a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion on service. So don't forget the number 0416 551 292. Thank you.
CYC, Christian Youth Channel.
And welcome back to Ask. And we're talking about service today. We have Father Daniel Fanous with us. So we're just going to get back into it. So Father, being a priest, priests are an epitome of service. However, we're not priests. Why should we serve to that extremity?
Well, first of all, you're saying that priests are the epitome of service. That's not necessarily the case. That's necessarily the case. Certainly we're called to be consecrated full-time service, and that should be our lives. But often you'll find lay people serving in a much higher degree, in a much more powerful way than even priests. And I don't think Christ has ever limited service to just priests or to just clergy. In actual fact, if you look at the New Testament, you look at the way the early church worked, you find that the service embraces every echelon of society. You have priests, you have deacons who are going and waiting at tables and serving people, you have widows serving, you have women serving, you have powerful women serving, you have weak women serving, you have everyone serving. You have young You know, Mark when he was young. You have so you have St. Peter when he was old. So you have every echelon of society serving. So I don't think it's the case that only priests should serve. And it comes back to the same question: why are we serving? Why are we serving? Are we serving because we think that's how a priest should be, or that's how a Sunday school servant should be, or that's how a married person should be? No, we serve because we're bringing the comfort of God to people. And if we understand service as that, then that means every single one of us is responsible to serve to our capacity. When Christ said, or God says to us, you shall love the Lord your God with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your heart and your strength, He's saying to us, love capacity. And so that means that if my capacity is my mind, I love Him to the capacity of my mind. If it's my soul, I love Him with my prayer and my prostrations and my caring for people. If it's about my heart, then I love Him with my emotions. Everything I have is towards Him. If I love Him with my strength, then everything that is within my reach, all my possessions, all my physical strength is directed towards Him. So I think for all of us, regardless of whether I'm a woman, I'm a man, a servant, a deacon, a priest, a bishop, all of us have to have that same idea. We are followers of Christ. That's what the word Christians means. It means we're followers of Christ. And if I'm His follower, then I follow in His footsteps. I bring His comfort to everyone that I can, in everyone that I meet, in every single part of my fibre, every part of my body, every part of my capacity is directed towards bringing that comfort to people, regardless if I'm a priest or not. Okay. And we often see that. I'll tell you a story. One of my uncles in Egypt, who didn't seem to be a very religious man, no one really knew him to be a religious man, would disappear on his lunch break. He had a business and would disappear on his lunch break, and no one knew exactly where he was going. One of my other uncles who was a bit suspicious was thinking he was up to maybe something not right, and so he followed him one day. And as he followed him, my uncle that was disappearing was a very rich man. And so what he found him, he was walking to churches, and he had like a Gucci suit or something like that. He would put oil on it, and he was going around cleaning the icons.
Oh, wow.
And so my other uncle got the shock of his life, because he thought he was doing something not right, and found him he's cleaning icons. And that's what he would do every lunchtime. And so everyone to their capacity has a way to serve. Even somebody that we think they could never be valuable. We know they're valuable, because Christ chooses everybody to serve Him.
Okay, all right. Thanks for sharing that.
No, that's right.
We've got a few questions actually coming in from the audience. I'll start off with the first one. One of the audience members is asking, I feel pressured to serve and I'm starting to detest it. Do I keep going or should I stop?
So I certainly don't think you should stop serving. I think you need to look at your motivations. What is it you detest? What is it you detest? Often if we look at that question, and I'm not saying this is the case of the viewer, I'm saying even myself in my own past, if I look at the reasons why I'm being uncomfortable with the service or something's not working with me, often I'll find that maybe pride is at play. Maybe I thought I was going to get something more from the service. I was going to get a higher standing, a higher status, and I'm not getting that. Maybe I thought I was going to get an emotional gratification, so I'll put my head down on my pillow at night, I feel comfortable, can sleep easy, and I'm finding that the service isn't giving me that. Maybe I felt when I was going to serve that I was going to change people, and that I would have these Sunday school kids, and that I was going to be able to turn them all into little Christs, and that's not happening, and they're all sinning, and they're all disappearing, and they're not going to church. So if I'm looking and expecting any of these results from my service, anything besides serving Christ alone, then of course I can start to detest it. Maybe I thought that I was going to be the leader in the class, or the leader in the service, and the leader in the youth group, the leader in the meeting, and that I'm finding that people are having authority over me, and I don't like that. So it's always good, the first step before stopping the service, analyze yourself. Look at yourself and see what exactly is falling short, what exactly is not meeting my expectations. And a very helpful thing to do is to speak to a priest or a confession father or a spiritual mother or a spiritual father, and have a chat with them and say, look, this is my situation. I'm uncomfortable with my service. I detest it. I'm angry. Why am I angry? And often you'll find the problem's not so much the service, the problem is often in me. Not to say that's the case with the viewer, but it's always a good place to start, myself rather than other people and the service.
Okay. Well, we had a question that originally came in as a phone call, but I think they got shy and they sent it in as a text. I encourage the viewers, please don't be shy. We're very accommodating to phone calls, and we won't ask you who you are. So the question that came in, what's the expected outcome for the conference in Egypt with His Holiness Pope Tawadros? What plans are there for the Mother Church to help her children in migrant lands?
Okay. It's a difficult question. I'm no prophet. I can't tell you exactly what the outcome is going to be. I can tell you a little bit about the conference. So it's a conference for the bishops outside of Egypt, so in the area we call the diaspora, the area outside of Egypt. And they're meeting to discuss issues that are specifically involving those churches outside of Egypt. And so that means things like, for example, how should a priest dress in public? Should he be wearing a galabia? Should he be wearing a pants and a shirt and a collar? Like a more kind of Western looking priest. What about Christmas? Should we celebrate Christmas in union with other Western countries, or should we celebrate it with Egypt? Certain hymns, the direction, the language, all these issues that are facing the church outside of Egypt. And so all I can tell you is, from what I expect, is that you have some very, very reasonable, very effective, very intelligent bishops making these decisions, and they're meeting together. And so at the very least, what we can expect from this is that there will be a common ground that will be established between the different dioceses in America and Australia, where they can meet together and discuss what are the pressing issues. And hopefully by doing that, they'll identify the issues and come up with a bunch of recommendations as to the way that they feel the church should respond to the dilemmas that are facing the West. In terms of how Egypt or the motherland can help us respond to those issues, or aid us in our response to those issues, I think this conference is a beautiful start. It's a beautiful start. The church outside of Egypt is not separate to the church inside Egypt. It's one church. It's one kingdom. It's all doing the same thing, which is bringing the comfort of Christ to the world. And so that will obviously mean that doing it outside of Egypt is a little bit different than doing it inside of Egypt. It doesn't mean there's any kind of separation, or that there's any kind of division, or even a different way of focusing. It's purely a way of how can we adapt ourselves to serving this place versus this place.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
Yeah. Another question that we have from an audience member. If you attend and serve in our Coptic Orthodox Church, is it wrong to also serve in non-Coptic churches?
So again, I think it depends on what the capacity of the service is. And so if, for instance, you're serving in a homeless kind of non-dogmatic, non-theological area where you're just delivering food to the homeless and that kind of thing, I don't see there's really an issue with that. Again, as long as you're grounded and you're strong in your faith. If it means that, for example, that I'm serving in a Sunday school class in another church that may not share the faith of the Orthodox Church, then it can be problematic, And those kind of questions are usually best directed and best answered by your confession father, who knows you well. But generally, we don't like to say that we're restrictive or that we're telling people what to do and what not to do, but it's a matter of your own kind of spiritual safety, where if I find that I'm being tied to another faith and that faith is at odds to my church, then that can cause a dilemma for me and that can cause issues for me.
Okay. I'd like to ask you a personal question.
Sure, go for it.
But it's up to you and the discretion on how you answer
That's all right.
this question.
No.
When you serve, do you see Christ in the people you serve?
Look, it's a hard question. I certainly try to see Christ. I often find that the way that I start to see or feel Christ is in serving the people that are difficult to serve. Often there'll be people, and we all have them, people that are annoying, people that are inconvenient, people that challenge us because we don't want to be around them. We find them to be, in a word, annoying. We don't want them to be around us. And so those kind of people are the ones that get rejected and no one serves them. And so you'll often find there'll be the one kid in the Sunday school class that no one wants to visit. It'll be the one person in the congregation that no priest wants to go and see. It'll be the one person that everyone knows as soon as you go to him, you know, his blood is thick, to use an Arabic expression. He's hard to deal with, she's hard to deal with. And so no one serves them. But if we consider the words of St. Paul, where St. Paul says that we're all part of one body. Is the little finger then less important than the heart? Is the little finger less important than the brain? No. And then St. Paul says something very interesting. He says, not only are we all equal, but look at what we do with our own bodies. And these are his words, not mine. He says, what do you do with the more embarrassing member? The member that no one wants to look at, no one wants to see, i.e. our genitals, for want for a better word in St. Paul's words. What do? We clothe them. Why do we clothe them? We put more glory on the elements of our body that are more unsightly or more unseemly, the more embarrassing elements. Why? It's to create equilibrium. It's to create peace. It's to create equality in the body. And so if we do that in our own bodies, St. Paul says, then shouldn't we do that in society? Where the person that no one wants to see, the person that is weak, the person that is rejected, the church should actually put more effort on that person, should put more glory on that person to bring them up to the same level. Whereas if I serve that person that really looks Christ-like, the person that's beautiful to hang out and everyone wants to be their friend and wants to serve them, then there's no equality in the body. But if I serve that person this week and bring him up to that same level, then there's equality. So for me personally, what I find is that if I go and try to serve that person that's rejected, if I try to understand them, if I try to hear what they're saying, then often within very, very short periods of time, that annoying person becomes a Christ for me. That person that's rejected or vile person or person that is an angry person, I start to understand him and start to discern the image of Christ within him. And then you start working and washing like Mother Maria.
How about if this person annoys you or frustrates you to the point where it causes you to sin? Should you pull back?
No, because then you have to look at yourself and saying, why am I sinning? Am I sinning because they're making me sin? Or am I sinning because there's something wrong with me? Do I have a lack in patience? Do I have a lack of love? Have I reached the limit of my love? Was my love a little bit false, a bit hypocritical, where I only love those people that love me? Whereas the first person that comes that hates me, I can't love. So always look at yourself, and persist. Do your best to understand that person. Do your best to see where that person is coming from. Because often you'll find that it's a weak person, somebody that's rejected, somebody that's hurt, and they might be putting up an exterior that is very frustrating, very annoying, very angry, very detestable. But actually there's somebody inside there that needs your help, that needs your care, that needs your love. So always try to understand, and always, as best as you can in your life, never ever focus on the better person to serve or the better service. Always try to balance it out by also looking at the weak, also looking at the rejected, because they're the ones that Christ's eye was always on. He always looked for the Samaritan woman. He always looked for that weak person, that leper, that person that had no one to look for them.
Okay, well that brings me to my next question. How do you serve someone who's left the church without being affected by their habits?
Yeah, and that's always a challenge. And again, it always requires wisdom. It always requires wisdom. Often in the more difficult cases, it's always good to have a chat with someone that can help you discern, so a spiritual father, a priest, or somebody like that, so that you can understand where that person's coming from and whether that person is a danger to you. Because sometimes I feel I'm strong and I can go into a difficult situation and not be affected by that difficult situation. Whereas if I speak to my spiritual father or my spiritual mother and they'll say to me, well, in actual fact, you're not that strong. Be wary, be aware. And so in those situations, we always like in those situations, be a little bit careful. Be a little bit careful. Because sometimes you're not strong enough to deal with that situation. And sometimes you may not be able to do it yourself. So send somebody else that is stronger than you.
Okay. Look, I got room for one more question for you.
Go for it.
This is a big one because I've seen it a lot happening here. In a service, you're always going to get 2 strong personalities or 3 strong personalities. And there's always going to be a power struggle and clash. It's going to turn people away, and it's going to make people walk away from service, especially if they didn't get their way. How can we avoid this clash and this power trip?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's not that we're seeing it in any service. We see it in any kind of organisation, that you'll often have conflict, you'll often have egos at play. And again, for us in the service, the focus has to be right. Am I building my kingdom? Am I building my church's kingdom? Or am I building God's kingdom? If I'm building God's kingdom, then that means if somebody else has an idea, even if I think that idea is not the best idea, it may be better than my idea. They're trying to build the kingdom as well. And so that means I often have to renounce myself. I have to humble myself to say that maybe their idea is better than my idea. And that's a big challenge for us. But the second I feel that it's my kingdom and my service and my meeting and my Sunday school class, my church versus their church, then you start to find that happening. But the second I feel that this is God's kingdom, then let them serve, let me serve. Let's find a way to work in humility together. And if we can't, then we know that something's wrong. We know that something's wrong. And so there are ways that we can do that. For instance, how do I know that even if I think that, this particular weekend is the best time to do a camp, and he suggests or she suggests another weekend, how do I know that my idea is better than their idea? How do I know? My logic tells me it is. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is. And if I humble myself, even if I'm wrong, then you'll find that God will bless that and it'll be a beautiful time. So I think it's very important that we realize I'm not building my kingdom, I'm building God's kingdom. Okay.
Well, I'd like to thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And it was great having your insight on this topic.
Thank you.
And also, I just want to remind the viewers, if you're not involved in a service, please see Father Daniel and annoy him and ask him, please give me a service. And I'm sure there are hundreds of services out there that he can give you. And just a reminder, for next week's episode, we're going to cover a very serious topic. We're going to talk about demonic possession. Is it true? Does it exist? Whether it does or not, stay tuned for next week's episode and find out if it exists, how we can deal with it and avoid it. And the phone number is 0416 551 292. I am Mina Ibrahim from your CYC studios in Sydney. Good night and God bless.
CYC, Christian Youth Channel.